Hey everyone, and welcome to the 100th episode of the Yogi Misfit Sessions. That's right, 100. My name is Danny Pomploon, and I am your host. So today is the 100th episode. My good friend Susannah Friedman is on the show. She was actually my first ever guest on the podcast, and she was on the show a couple episodes ago, and we just kind of decided on that episode that she was going to interview me for the 100th. This episode, she just took over and kind of asked me some questions about what I was up to and what the show was up to and what I've learned, and it's just kind of me babbling about the show and the last year and where I've gone with it all. So I hope you guys get something out of it. As a quick reminder, we are always looking for support on the show. So we wouldn't have gotten to 100 episodes without all of y'all. We are looking for donations in our donor box. You can check out the link below. But if we get just 400 of you guys to donate $1 a month, the show will sustain itself, which is super cool. And if you can't do that, no big deal. But maybe share the show with your friends and head over to iTunes and leave us a review because it helps get the show out to all of your friends. It has been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be doing this podcast and to have made it 100 episodes with you guys. Thank you for all the love, the support, and of course, SF Yoga Magazine. You guys rock. You're amazing. And without further ado, here goes me on my show. 100 episodes.
Crazy.
I know.
Can you believe it? It feels like the first episode was like really yesterday.
It was yesterday, Susannah. You just don't remember. It was all just a dream.
Time is relative.
What is time, man?
Do you know I meant to look it up, but as you know, and now everyone will know, I'm in Mexico, like on pretty shoddy Wi-Fi. But do you know the date of the first episode?
I don't know it off the top of my head, although I can look it up, I'm sure, in a matter of like moments. TBD on that. Yeah. We'll continue with the show.
But like in terms of years, like when was that?
I think it was, if I remember correctly, it was like 3 years ago.
Damn. Is that real?
Yeah, I think it was 3 years ago.
Wow. Time flies when you're doing yoga.
September 10th, 2016.
Damn. Wow.
Yep. That was our first episode. September 10th, 2016.
Crazy. Well, congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
3 years later, and here we are.
And it was all just an accident too. It wasn't supposed to happen. I think we have talked about this before, but I was just sick in bed and I was bored and I was like, I'm going to start a podcast.
Totally. But you're also that person, like you're a doer. You know what I mean? Like if you have an idea, you're going to do it. Whereas some people, if they have an idea, they're going to think about it for a long time and then maybe do it.
For sure. Yeah, no, I'm going to get shit done. For
sure. Yeah. Thinking about 100 episodes, like what does that feel like to you?
I mean, it's really cool. Like I'm super excited and stoked that the show has gotten so far and that it's even gotten to where it's gotten. And it's really cool. It's an accomplishment. You know what I mean? I didn't go into it thinking that this was going to be like a long-term thing. And now I really love it. And I love that I get to connect with different types of people and, like all these amazing yoga teachers who I've like just wanted to pick their brains. And a lot of it is not only picking their brains, but listening to their story.
For sure.
And listening to their wisdom. And, as people have said about the podcast, like it's not really me beefing up a guest. It's more just like, let's listen to what they have to say. I don't know. It's really cool. It's definitely an accomplishment. I never thought I was gonna do this for as long as I have, and it was supposed to be just kind of this fun thing on the side, and it really just became something way bigger. And I'm super, it just feels really good. I feel like it's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah. Well, I think you might have, I think you've you've touched on this before, but I think one of the things you just said, which is really interesting, is like just listening to people tell their stories, which is such a big deal for you? Because, you know, I've been on other podcasts. I mean, I'm obviously extremely famous.
Right. Totally.
Totally. No, but like I've been on a couple other podcasts, you know, and it's much more interview style, which is great. Like everybody should play to their strengths, and your strength is more like conversation and just like shooting the shit and then getting to know people and hearing their story. But I think I know, but maybe if you want to talk a little bit about like why sharing people's personal stories about how they came to yoga, why yoga is important to them, like why is that important to you that they share their personal story?
I mean, if it wasn't for me sharing my personal story, like the whole yoga thing wouldn't be a thing. But, you know, for a lot of it, why I think it's important to share these stories, you know, part of it, like, you know, the collaboration with Fierce Calm Stories that we do. And, you know, just there's so much wisdom that I pull from on the show, but a lot of it is to normalize conversations, you know, like a lot of stuff is, you know, we talk about mental health. Sometimes we talk about like eating issues. We've talked about everything on the show. You know, sometimes it's really, really rooted in yoga, and other times it's kind of sort of rooted in yoga. There's always a thread of it, but being able to normalize certain conversations instead of, you know, trying to hide them or, you know, shove them under the rug, I think is really important. And, you know, I'm not trying to, I guess, not being like I'm the badass of the bad boy of the yoga podcasting world, but I tend to have some conversations that people don't necessarily want to have. And not that I do it to provoke anybody, but I do it to provoke everybody. You know what I mean? It's like everyone wants to say the thing. Yeah. Everyone wants to share this certain, you know, some of the stuff, not everything on the show is taboo or any of that, but there's just so much out there that can be heard. And I think for me, creating this platform to get people's voices out there, whether they're just, you know, teachers or just sharing how yoga changed them, I think it's another way that the practice can be shared with other people.
For sure. For sure. And you and I have had this conversation. It was actually what our last podcast 97 was going to be, but then we got on a subject, which I think was really important. And I'm really happy we talked about it, which was, you know, about touch and all that stuff. But we were talking about, like really needing to blatantly say that the guru model doesn't work, because none of us we're teachers, we're not gurus, because none of us are enlightened beings as far as I know, you know? And I think that it's so important for people, especially people who are students and who don't teach, to hear teachers' stories so that they understand that it's just more humans doing their best. And we happen to have a little bit more knowledge in this one area. And I think that that's part of what sharing people's stories does and is so helpful. Like you said, like normalize, not, or at least like not even create a pedestal to be put on. Like, and without understanding where people come from, it's too easy for students. I mean, I did it with my teacher for a long time, you know, it's too easy for students to like idealize and think like, oh, they're perfect and I can't be a yogi unless I'm this perfect way. And it's like, no one's perfect.
Right. We're all human, just trying to live this experience. Right.
And we're trying to like use yoga as sort of a like corral.
And you hear it too on a lot of the people that have come on the show, like in the last, you know, even in the last year, you know, producing the show, you know, I think it was the last year where I have to look it up, but it was sometime in the last year, not like 2019, but like the last 12 months where we started to produce the show once a week versus once a month, what we were doing for a while. And it was, you know, it was cool because I got to listen to a bunch more people and had to have a lot more stories, you know, shared out there. And yeah, it's, I don't know, it's just been really, it's been really cool looking back at actually this year, like actual 2019, you know, this was one of my outlets to really kind of help with all of the burnout and whatnot. Like this was something that I got to look forward to. This was something that I got to not just do, but be a part of versus it being like another thing on the list. So it really, you know, and I mean, I've been, you know, pretty super vocal, but this year was intense for me. It was super, super, super intense. And the podcast and having all these cool people on the show was like something I got to look forward to. I got to like sit down and have a conversation with either someone I knew or someone I didn't know.
Yeah. Amazing. How nice is that? It's so interesting too. And so funny that like teaching, there are certain parts of teaching that like, and that parts of the career that like, you just don't want to do. And I think people don't think about that. But so it's really funny to hear you, not funny, haha, but funny, interesting to hear you say, to just hear you say like that this was one of the things that you really looked forward to. I think it's really great that you had that. So maybe, I mean, you've done 100 episodes at this point, and you probably maybe can't answer this. Like, you might think later of something else, but is there one story or one moment or one person or whatever that was just like a great highlight to you? Not downplaying any other people or their stories.
Right,
you know, but
right. Yeah. We don't have favorites, but my favorite was, this is a toss up. I had a really, I even had a fangirl moment in real life, but Tiffany Kershank on the show was awesome. And I'd never met her. I followed her for a really long time. And I just think she's the cat's meow. I think she's super cool. She's super smart and just really I thoroughly enjoy her. And to be able to speak to her was for me, like, I remember after the interview, I was like, whoa, I got to speak to Tiffany. Like, I was just so mind blown. And even when I met her in person, not too shortly after that, and was just like, I just want to say thank you so much. She's like, come sit down and hang out. Like, let's chat, and she was just so sweet. I think that for me was just a pretty cool moment. And someone that really blew me away on the show, like someone whose episode I'd heard multiple times, was Christopher Pace. And he shared his fierce calm story, about how yoga saved his life. And not that I characterize anybody, I obviously I know who these people are on the show beforehand. I follow them and, do my research and whatnot. And I'd read his story and I'd heard about, I followed his stuff and was reading, but to hear him speak was like, I had to remember that I actually had to talk to him, because I just wanted him to keep speaking and speaking. There was so much wisdom and there was so many golden nuggets that he just tossed out in his episode. Like, I remember talking to a few different people about it, being like, who is this dude? And how, he was an absolute peach to have on the show. And it was really cool. It was really powerful. So Tiffany and Chris for sure were my two. I mean, that's so hard to say, because then I got to talk to like Anna Forrest and, Andrea Ferretti, who I'm a huge fan of, and just a lot of really, there's so many people out there that like, and then there was like, just everybody.
Dharma Mitra.
Dharma Mitra. I got to talk to Dharma Mitra. That was insane. Yeah. Like, it was super cool. And I'm so, again, I'm just really, I'm humbled that I get to do this and that I get to have these conversations and that I get to share them with, everybody that listens to the show. So
for sure. Yeah. And I think too, like, that's one of the great things about podcasts being such a big deal and it being sort of like the next wave of radio and, or the next iteration of radio, is that like, it is so different to read someone's story versus hearing them in their own voice tell their story. Because like you hear their connection to it and you hear their emotion about it and you hear like the little intonations where you're like, oh, that thing stuck, or that was the pivotal moment, and I think that's like so powerful about podcasts and radio, is like actually hearing it come from the person's mouth rather than you creating what you think their voice is, because I think when you read, you can sort of put yourself in it a little bit more and that changes the story,
100%. Yeah. To get to hear someone's voice, is, for me, it's so much more potent. You get to not only hear their story, but you also get to hear them. Yeah. You really get to hear their passion, their drive, their, everything behind the thing it just adds another layer.
So, I mean, not sort of on the flip side of that, but without pointing out any episodes or people, has there been anything that happened over the last 3 years where you were like, a learning experience of like, oh, I wish I had done this, or, like what has been your biggest learning experience, I guess? And what have you learned over the last 3 years?
Oh man, There were a couple episodes where actually, I mean, I can point it out. There were a couple episodes where, when we did Dharma Dudes with Rocky, where we talked about just like Burning Man and, being queer and being, sharing that side of myself and not, holding this image of being a yoga teacher. And I had said some things on the show, and afterwards I was like, oh shit, I really haven't said that stuff out loud. Maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe I should have censored myself. Maybe I should have, and I sat with it. And even as like I was, as the show was being produced and put out there, I was still like, oh my God, I just kind of revealed a couple other things. And it was actually my partner who was like, and that's exactly who you are. So you don't have to lie and you don't have to hold that back, so just let it be you. And while I thought it was going to be like a mess and a train wreck or whatever, there were a couple people that were like, maybe you shouldn't have said that stuff. And that was cool. I understood where they were coming from. They were like, well, trying to protect an image or something like that. But the amount of other people that came in and were like, whoa, that was so raw. That was so real. We had no idea. That's awesome. Like blah, 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 blah. Like more of that, was way more important. Like I'm done with this whole image thing. I'm done with trying to be like, I'm a yoga teacher. And so I can't do this. No, I do all the things, you guys. I cuss, I swear, I'd make mistakes, like all the things. Like I said this the other day, I'm like, I'm going to, just so we're all aware, I'm going to probably disappoint someone at some point, if not everyone at one point in life. I'm going to make some mistakes. I'm going to do some really dumb things, and I'm going to try my best every day to do the best that I can. But I'm not going to be held into this other, I'm just going through my own experience, and trying to share it and hope that resonates. But I think that was probably the biggest moment. And it wasn't a moment in like, I need to censor myself moving forward, but I need to actually be even more real and authentic. I was talking about this, last night, whereas beforehand I felt like I needed to cry backstage. Yeah. Now I feel like I can cry with everybody.
Totally.
Does that make sense?
Sure. Oh, it makes complete sense. I feel like, I haven't looked at the astrology of this. So I can't say for certain, but you and I are both Leos, and I feel like for both of us, well, first of all, going back to when we first met 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, something like that.
Six, something, yeah.
When you were DJing in the window of Lululemon and I was teaching a class. But I think one of the things that drew both of us to each other was our honesty and sort of just blatant or bluntness, I guess, and how we just like say the thing. And I really appreciate that about you. And I think you appreciate that about me.
For sure.
But I think both of us this year went through like a transformation towards just allowing ourselves to be more of ourselves in our public persona, so to speak, or like closing that gap, if there was any, between a private and public persona. Like, I don't think either of us had a huge, like we're not vastly different people, but there's still a little bit of protecting yourself going on, I think. And I think both of us have dropped that a lot more. Like, I was teaching, I did kirtan, I did chant camp. I did kirtan camp with, Jai this last summer. And I came back, and the first class that I taught afterwards, coming back, like I've been teaching for 10 years. I've never cried in front of a class. Yeah. Like I've never showed emotion, and not necessarily because I've held it in, but just because like it hasn't needed to come out, or if it has, I didn't want to put it on other people or whatever. But it was just like, I was talking about my experience of being with him and what it's like to sit with someone who has zero agenda, and what it's like to look into the eyes of someone who just wants to hear you and has no agenda. And I just started like weeping in front of this class, and I like couldn't help it. And I had a similar moment after class was over and after I was done like talking about that, where I was like, oh, fuck. Yeah. Like, did I just cross a line where like people were like, I didn't come to class to hear X, Y, and Z,
right. Right.
But everyone's similarly reaction was like, thank you so much for sharing that. Like, right. And I think that what a gift that is. And like, you train teachers, I train teachers. Like, I think it's so important for yoga teachers to know, like, the more honest you are, the more vulnerable you are in the way that you're comfortable with, the more people feel safe with you, and the more they feel safe exploring that part of themselves. And it's just like, it's a gift to everybody. It's freedom for you. It's sort of allowing someone to have that same freedom too. But I just love that transformation. Yeah,
it's been, I mean, I just echoing all that. It's been really cool. And it's not that like, I'm like, oh, well, I just don't give a shit anymore, because I do, but it's what I'm less inclined to be like, here's an image that I want to portray, and more inclined to be like, this is who I am. These are real parts of me, and you get to choose whether you want to do something with that or not. I've chosen that this is me.
Totally. How powerful is that? I mean, for everybody, you know, because like, it's so powerful for you to just stand in yourself and be yourself. And then it's also powerful for other people to know who you are. So there's no second guessing about anything, you know?
Right.
I was going to say something else about it, and then it sort of just fell out of my head and I forgot.
It's okay.
Because that's what happens sometimes. When you've spent, you know, over a week with your family.
Oh yeah, it's aggressive.
It's super aggressive. It's been interesting. Anyways, different podcast. So like, where do you see, I mean, not that this is the end, but this is the next question that's coming to my mind. Like, where do you see this moving forward from here?
Well,
I know you're taking a little break, which is good.
Yeah, I'm taking a little break over the holidays, and, you know, and then from there, we're looking at, you know, the show has been super awesome. It's been really fun to do, and I like look forward to it. And I think people do as well. And so I want to continue to just produce really good content, really good shows, and get people to, just get people what they want, you know, get the stories that need to be out there. I want to continue to share the stories of how yoga have saved people's lives. I want to continue to have, you know, real conversations, and I want to continue to just, you know, make this thing be a thing and create a community around it, because I think it's really awesome. People have started, you know, supporting the show financially, which is something that we're always looking for, because, you know, we don't make money on these things. We make less money on these things. But that's like, there's like this slow turnaround of it moving into that direction. And I think I'm just going to stick with that pulse and stick with that vibe and see where it goes. And, you know, I'm not afraid for this thing to just, you know, be done one day, but I don't think that that's where it's going.
No, I mean, I think it'll be done when you feel like it's time to move on to the next thing, which is like, might happen, might not happen, but is your prerogative. And, you know, I think the thing that I was going to say before, was that I've even seen it, which like for you and for me, in terms of just being more honest and like, this is me and blah, 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 is like, how you've been showing up on social media too, or, and I mean this in the best way, the lack of showing up on social media. Yeah. Just being like, I just don't want to, you know what I mean? Just not having that pressure. Yeah. Is such a freedom. Like it's such a gift. And that can only come from like being really secure and choosing who you are, rather than choosing needing to keep up with who you think people want you to be. Yeah. You know? Yeah. It's super interesting. You know, even doing this show is like a choice of sharing not only other people's stories, but also me, you know, cause I mean, I get into some pretty nitty gritty stuff on the show, and, you know, I don't know. I guess I'm more inclined to just continue to keep it real and have people stick with that, I guess. For sure. Moving forward, have you considered, like, because I was just thinking about, you know, what you shared about your and Rocky's Dharma Dudes podcast and how well that went and how well it was received. Like, have you considered doing, like, obviously within the same vein, but maybe some different experiences, interviewing people that aren't necessarily in the yoga world, but like have had profound shifts in consciousness or mindfulness from some other aspect of the mindful movement? I mean, for sure. I think I totally would love to get things going in that direction as well. I think, you know, the more yoga is just one of the things. I think that as the show continues to grow, and, you know, like anything else, it'll have its own phases of things that it'll
start to turn into, that would be something that I would really look forward to, not just having yoga teachers, but also, meditation practitioners and meditation teachers. And, I mean, if it's going to be beneficial for others, let's do it.
Right. That's one of my favorite things about this podcast. And also who you just interviewed and who's a really good friend of both of ours, Krista's podcast. Also, it's like, I love these podcasts that are of service, that are like, if this is going to help people, let's put it out into the world. And it, like, all of them take a different tone, but it's so important and so necessary.
Yeah.
And I think that's the question you have to ask. Like, is having this person on going to be of service to people? Is it going to help people?
Right.
And if it is, like, like, do it. So I'm sure it's related to the podcast. It must be related to the podcast, but, not necessarily specifically about it. Like, what are you loving about yoga right now?
Oh man.
I know it's a hard question because I know the answer could be like, 8 hours long.
My practice has really changed so much in the last year. It's funny because I've gotten really strong physically. I can do like some more party I love playing on my hands. This is a thing.
Yeah.
I love arm balances. I love handstand. I love things like that. It's not, it's not like all of my practice for sure, but it's definitely something that I just have so much fun.
Yeah.
And although that has gotten really strong, the stronger side of my practice has been sitting. The stronger side of my practice has been contemplation. Mm-hmm. As I looked back after this like burnout thing or whatever, I guess that's podcast included because it was like one of the other things that I had to do, but I looked forward to it, but I had still to do it.
Yeah, of course.
I realized that I was practicing yoga this entire time and not knowing I was practicing yoga. I was like, oh my God, I've been doing the other parts of yoga.
Yeah.
And I think that like right now, my 2-hour mornings are like legit. They're great. I wake up and do my coffee and my hot water and, sit for a little bit and then I contemplate and then I read a little bit of yogic text. And, and then I go back and, contemplate some more and then I'll do Kriya and, whatever it is that's going on. But that has been so much of a saving grace in my life. Like, I don't think I would have gone through all of this year, podcast retreats, everything included without that. Like it's been really potent to just sit and to write and to check in.
Yeah, your burnout would have been far more intense if you didn't have that consistency, I think.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. No, for my morning is like so important to me. And it's been the same for years now, which is like similar. Like I wake up, I sit. I do mantra, like I have specific mantra that I do, and then I sit and then I read sacred text and then I chant. And it's like, when I don't get to do those things, like I don't have my harmonium with me right now. Obviously, because I guess not obviously, but it would be a little silly. Also, it's a hotel and like, I'm not sure everyone else wants to hear it. But it does feel like it's harder to keep it together the rest of the day, Yeah.
Yeah. If I miss out on that thing if I miss out on the morning ritual, like the rest of the day is just.
Yeah. And I feel like too, if I can say this, and I think I can, like knowing you for so long now and having watched your journey with yoga since being in the Bay and then making the decision to become a full-time teacher and just the whole transition and everything that's happened, like your level of presence this year has changed. Like the quality of your presence has changed.
It's less present. It's like I'm less around.
Well, physically you're less around, but you're more available, I feel like.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I feel it.
I think I know you feel it. Like we've talked about it a lot in our own like private conversations. But I think all of that stuff is like, it's so powerful that you share that that's been such a huge part of your practice this year, because it has had, at least in my experience of being your friend, like it has had a significant role to play in how I experience you, you know? Just like more peaceful, more calm. Like I feel like you now, there's less even though you're traveling a lot, which you're cutting down on, but like, there's sort of less of a sort of frantic feeling.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you're just sort of like there's more trust. That's what it is. I feel like there's more trust now with you.
I for sure feel it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas beforehand it was the need to do. And now it's just more like, I'm just going to be for a bit.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. What a gift that is.
Yeah.
Like, I think about it all the time. Like how, I mean, it sounds really corny. It sounds really cheesy, but how like, you know, we're not human doings. We're human beings.
Yeah.
But we're really good at the doing part as if that means something.
Right.
Whereas like the being, like just be with yourself, just be, you know, just be with the moment, be with yourself, be with the experience, be with your experience of the moment without needing to do anything about it. And then make your appropriate decision from there, then take action from there, you know?
I mean, the cool thing about the podcast is I get to just be for a little bit with these people on the show.
Totally.
You know, I get to just sit there and listen and, you know, soak it. I mean, totally selfish, but a lot of it's for me.
I mean, isn't that like a win-win?
Yeah, totally. I mean, if I need it, I'm sure someone else needs it out there.
1,000%. Exactly. So, okay. So thinking ahead, I'm sure you have some people lined up, but like who right now is like we're just going to put it out into the world. Who is your dream besides me? Who?
Yeah. Yep. Stumped. I have no clue. That was it.
Oh, I love you. Who is your dream guest?
Oh man. Dream guest.
Also, while you think about it, can you have Heath on, please?
Yeah, we'll bring Heath on the show.
I feel like it would be, I mean, he's a yogi. He has an incredible story. Like his energy, who he is as a human, I feel like would translate.
Totally. For those of you that are like, who's Heath? Heath's my partner.
Sorry. Just outed that name.
Yeah, totally. Probably. Oh man, this is so rough. You know who I would actually love to speak to, who I would love to speak to is probably, I think Catherine Budig. You know, Dice has been a really big influence in my yoga. He's actually one of the reasons why I decided to start teaching yoga, him and a couple other teachers.
Yeah.
But when I decided to get really serious about it, I was following him around online and whatnot. And I was like, this guy's really cool and really approachable. And I kind of want to like do things like him. And then I met Jason and Janet and all these other people. And so I would love to hear his story into yoga and where he's at now with it, because I've seen his growth as a teacher. And same with Catherine. I guess I'm doing two again, but same with Catherine. Like, you know, I've seen her growth, you know, from online and whatnot. And I would just love to hear, you know, how and where and why she's gone through there's so many, you know, changes and new avenues and new shifts. I would love to hear from her as well. She just seems super cool.
Oh my God. One of my life goals is to be friends with her. So Catherine, if you hear this, my name's Susannah Friedman. I live in Oakland. I think
we love you.
We love you. Danny and I will show you around. But yeah, no, I think Catherine's journey, I don't know Dice's story as well, but I think Catherine's journey is so interesting. And, you know, she was such a like hardcore Ashtangi in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then the transition to where she's at now. And I love also how real she is.
Exactly.
How much she shows her life in her social media as well, I think is like really refreshing. And she's gone through like huge life changes in the last few years too, which she did that publicly.
Totally.
You know, which is just like fucking rad and ballsy and everything I want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's a good one.
It's been an incredible journey on the show, and I'm so glad I've got to 100 episodes, and obviously I wouldn't be able to do this without all the listeners out there, and the super big shout. There has been a lot of people that have helped put this show together. You know, my podcast producer Rory is just amazing and awesome, and he even through my burnout this year, he was on top of me, making sure that I had things in and I was turning things late on time. And he was just super helpful and like on top of it. And then there, has been, some other help in there as well. I had Joey, who was facilitating a lot of like show notes and things like that. And it's just, it's not a one-man show. It takes a lot of people to really make this thing happen. And so I want to, just give a shout out to them. And then also just for people that are listening to the show, like thank you. That's really it. I thought this thing was going to be cool. And it was just a weird idea in my head. And I was like, okay, let's just do it. So thanks for 100 episodes.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great way to wrap it up. Congratulations on this 100th episode. And thank you so much for having me on this episode with you.
Thanks for letting me babble on the 100th episode about whatever the hell I wanted to.
No problem. Anytime. But, I feel like maybe now I'll be on every 100th episode instead of forcing people to listen to our ridiculous banter in between. It can just be like a special role. But Danny, I love you so much. I'm so proud of you. And this podcast is amazing. And I think it's just going to keep going such great places.
Thank you. And thanks for all the support.
Yeah.
And again, just to everyone listening out there, thank you guys so much for 100 episodes strong. And I will continue to do my best to produce an amazing show and give you guys quality content that you love and or need.
And both. Okay. Well, from Mexico.
And from San Francisco, California.
Adios.
Until the next Yogi Misfit sessions. This is Danny and Susannah saying peace out.
Bye-bye.